Is anyone who would like to ask a question?
I would like to ask this question to Joel. Mm, how far has our government gone in terms of providing, legislations that will help our mining industry? Uh,
So the government of the DRC has provided legislation, and the legislation mainly touches on big corporations. But the big issue for these mines is that there is artisanal, it's an artisanal industry. So it's not big corporations that are digging, it's normal people, the normal citizens, and these are not protected. Whereas the government's laws mainly touch on corporations that pay them royalties, and corporations, when they have a mining site, they have more security and safety than the people.
I have received a question from Lillian. She's asking if there are any active human rights groups working in the area to help overcome this problem.
Yes, there are very many active groups in the DRC that are helping fight this. And we can have Panzi Foundation is one of them, Lucha is one of them, because the conflicts minerals themselves, they touch on all the aspects of people's lives. You might be fighting only child labor, or you're fighting sexual violence, but the origin is that they come from these conflicts, and these conflicts are still funded and financed by the illegal trades that happen around the mining.
And then she has a follow-up to that in terms of if since there are human rights groups, could people help by donating to them? Is that a possibility?
Yes, you can also help by donating to them, and that is really a step to take. And these human rights group also, they make their way to even lobby and help the government enact laws that are going to protect not only local leaders, but also those that are digging around these mines. So we should even look into the contract and royalties that the government is providing to big corporations. And because they have mining rights and mining exploitations, but what they do is also something to look at carefully. So when we are looking at these human rights and they don't have enough means, and also they are supported sometimes by people who have different agendas, and so it is hard for them to even continue and keep fighting only one issue, because they fight very many issues at the same time, and it's hard for them to allocate resources.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was wondering, was there an impact that the DoddFrank regulation brought to the table? Were there any reduction after the American government put them in place? And if I remember correctly, a few years ago, I think those regulations they were kind of scaled back by the Trump administration. So what was the impact of that too?
Yeah, so the Dodd-Frank Act, 5 years after its implementation, the money that armed groups were making from these conflicts decreased by it was estimated by was decreased by 65%, because they were making around 600 millions before, and then it was now 200 millions. And the issue is that this Section 502 was put in the Dodd-Frank Act, which itself is sort of more of a financial act. But if this section was a separate law by itself, then it wouldn't be attacked, because people were attacking the Dodd-Frank Act and not the section itself. And so it is very important to separate it from other legislations, because when it is bundled with other legislations, it makes it hard. Because also other companies were saying, when we have to report our financials or supply chain to the ACC in the US, it is hard for us to trace where these minerals come from, because when we go to the smelters, they've already bundled everything together, mixed everything together. And it's hard for them. When we ask them information, where do you get this from? They also don't tell us. And this is, for instance, where Apple falls short. So Apple may reveal its outsourcing, but it is not going to tell you which audited smelters or suppliers get mines from conflict zones.
Following up on that, Jan Vlecek has a question. Do you happen to know if Oxford has a similar policy in place, such as St. Andrews, to ensure buying no conflict minerals?
No, Oxford does not have such a policy. And unfortunately, even the UK also has withdrawn its policy, because the policy was, it was a joint policy with the EU, a joint law with the EU, and the EU just enacted it this January after the UK had left. And so only the University of Edinburgh and St. Andrews so far have done this. Exeter was also having a resolution on it, but there were a lot of blocks. So if you think you also have a good chance of having a resolution passed, and you think it's a fight that you can take on, it is something that I encourage you to do, and I will be helping you along the way.
Great, thanks. The next question is again from Lillian, and she's basically asking, who supplies the technology or the equipment that the army groups are using to dig and extract the minerals in the mines?
This is done by a lot of middlemen, because the army groups themselves do not dig. So they make people do the labor. And these people also have to find the materials. And there is an entire black market that also goes around that. They're going to go to companies like big companies, of course, can go to Gécamine, for instance, or any other mining corporation that is in the Congo. And then they have a lot of materials that they just feel like they're not of use to them anymore. And they get from those companies sort of auction.
So then the follow-up then to that is, could those suppliers be targeted as an avenue to limit the abilities of the army groups to expand and maintain the mines?
Yes, the suppliers could also be targeted. The only issue with the suppliers to be targeted is that these suppliers themselves are taxed by the militias. So the militias, as they control the region, they will say, for whatever 1 kilogram of cassiterate that you sell, 50% of the profit is ours. And so it becomes even hard for the suppliers themselves to control, because they're also not protected by the government. So it is important to also have in place something that the government is going to say, we're going to protect these people who are digging and searching, and we're also going to check that there is no child labor and people are not working in hazardous condition. All safety conditions are put in place, because they even dig in conditions that are not humane.
All right.
Great.
I'm just quickly going to follow and check in with Remy if Remy is back online.
He's back, but his connection keeps cutting, so I don't know how stable it is.
All right. As you figure that technical issue out, I think we can continue a couple more questions. I have one from NAS. What has been the impact of these campaigns, like from campaigns from schools and universities? If you have any examples of that. Joel, you're muted. Sorry.
Dozens of schools have passed resolutions, like we have SMU in the US that passed a resolution. We also have some high schools in Washington states that were able to pass resolutions. The one state in the US that has also passed a resolution to only purchase from conflict-free product is the state of Massachusetts in 2017. So some progress has been done. And even the EU started looking into this law back in 2012, and then 2017, they had some debate around the law, and it is in 2021 that it has now been enacted. We hope that even if it has been withdrawn in the UK, because the law is still there on the UK's website, UK's government website. So we hope that in the future they will look into this, but they can only look into it if we also build on some pressure and be like, we care about conflict minerals, and we want this to be a law so that we know that people are sleeping at peace in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the riches is benefiting its population.
Just a quick follow-up to that. Does the international community then complement those impacts, or do they do more harm than good in what they're trying to do?
By international community, you mean organizations such as the UN?
Yeah, non-governmental organizations and aid agencies.
So they complement when these laws are enacted. They complement all efforts that is being done on both sides, not only in the West, but even locally in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But something that we also have to acknowledge is international organizations in the Congo are not decision makers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we had a question from Frederic, and he's asking if the Congolese government can create jobs and schools in conflict zone, or is there even an efficient way to reduce conflicts?
Yes. So also this was part of the laws that the government enacted. So for all the companies that were investing into mining sites, these companies were asked to build schools, create jobs, and be environmentally responsible, so socially responsible. The only caveat is that the government itself does not follow it up. And this is what we get from these organizations. They tell you, when we began, we were doing these things, but we're never audited for what we were doing. And it also seemed somehow to profit the government by them not doing what they were supposed to do in terms of the social impact. So the Congolese government, of course, they can create schools and also jobs into these areas by also having companies that are sort of independently managed, because we have a government organization that handles all the mining, especially in the Katanga province, but the management itself is not worthy of praise.
Great. So the next question is from Charlene, and she asks, have blockchain technology been used to track conflict-free minerals in the Congo?
Blockchain technology has also been used. Yes, it has been used. And there is even one laboratory in South Kivu that has also helped in this. And they've asked companies to also start using blockchain, because from blockchain, you can even know where, like, the source of each mineral, where it comes from which sites and everything. But companies say that it is costly, and that's the issue. So we can also push for blockchain technology to be used into knowing where the source is.
I have another question. So in speaking about efforts and actions, does this, in terms of combating the use of conflict minerals, is this required to be done on a global scale, global movement scale? And is that what is needed essentially to put sufficient pressure on multinational corporations?
Yes, this should be done on a global scale, and it should be an organized effort, because we can see, for instance, when the law was passed in the US, but not in other countries. And this, for instance, makes some people who are buying these devices in other countries not care as much as the US government does or did. And so if we have a coordinated global effort where every country cares about conflict minerals, and we're even asking countries in Asia where the smelting happens to give us the source of the minerals, then it is going to be more impactful.
Thanks. I'll ask a question. Given that we know that there was a change in government in Congo, is there any comparisons that you can draw between the previous government and the current one when it comes to conflict minerals and how they have basically dealt with the issue?
With the current government, we see a hope or a promise for fighting the current issues. And the president has also spoken about conflict minerals, and he has given some sort of space to human rights activists to report to him what is happening. And right now, the country itself is being consumed by the conflicts that is happening in Bunia and Beni, and this is where gold is even. So the gold in Bunia is helping into financing ADFs, for instance, and this is even making it harder for the government itself to fight. So the president may be willing, and he is willing to fight these people, but since they are financed and they also have some sort of external support from neighboring countries' governments, it becomes hard to fight. But we've seen that the change from the previous administration to the current one is a hopeful one. And we just hope that it doesn't become a promise, but actions are also being implemented.
Great. So it seems like this is a deeper issue than it seems on surface level. And yeah, I think it's understandable if people get exhausted and wonder how someone giving up, for instance, either their cell phone or purchasing from a certain company will create impact. So I think those are some of the things that we as individuals will grapple with, is we're trying to go against these multi-billionaire companies that have existed for years and have planted their own mines and their own industries in these locations. So it seems as though we're at a lost cause, but given that you have brought forward some of the organizations that are working locally and some of the initiatives also taken internationally, perhaps there is hope to them. Yeah.
And another, yeah, you're right. And another impactful thing that these organizations can do is they can also decide to invest directly in the Congo, where the mining happens. Just like the way we see they start to fund some businesses where they are, like their respective countries. So if they do something around that, it can also help. Yeah.
A question that comes to mind for me is looking at the time that we're in. I hope not to upset anybody by bringing this up, but given that there is a pandemic going on, have you seen any effects of the pandemic, either reducing the efforts that's been done or encouraging efforts that have been done?
The pandemic is reducing efforts that has been done because the supply chain happens physically, right? And a lot of people, the default mode now is working remotely. Of course, COVID's consequences or impact is not as grave as is in the West, but now supply chain is also hard to track because companies are failing to do the audit. And audit, of course, happens from third party independent companies, just like a firm also takes big corporations, big accounting firm to do an audit. But these auditing firms also have some strings, because if they don't do or don't provide some of the things that these companies want, then they may go to another one and business goes away.
There's a question slightly less related by Catherine Calaris. Could or should the mining companies like Glencore and others play a bigger role in limiting conflict mines?
Companies could play a bigger role, but the only issue from these companies is that they're there for business, and what they control is not even 1% of the mining. Like Glencore access to mining, and the minings that they have is not more than 5% of the mining reserve that is in the Congo. So even if we tell them to act, they may only act on those things they have access to. And Glencore is in the Katanga province. And in the Katanga province, there is not a lot of conflict as in the Kivu region. And the conflict happens in the Kivu region around these 4 TGs. And Glencore mainly looks for cobalt and copper. And but the minerals that are mostly strategic are the 4 ones that we mentioned: tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold.
Just to follow up on that then, just outside of companies, what about the neighboring countries towards the DRC? So if you look at Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, those countries, are there efforts that are happening across those nations
Unfortunately, there is not efforts that happen from neighboring countries because they benefit from these trades. That is why you're going to see countries such as Rwanda, for instance, being a big exporter in tantalum, but there is not any mining site in Rwanda around tantalum, or not as many as there are in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So this is helping, and we can see that in the past decade, of course, Rwandan economy has grown exponentially. So it is hard for them to play a bigger role or to influence what is happening in the Congo if it is benefiting to them. And countries such as Burundi, for instance, says it does not export any coltan. So, but people or middlemen who are trading these minerals pass through Burundi. So, but Burundi is not going to tell us that we got any revenues from coltan because we do not export it, we do not trade it. So it is a lot of gray area.
I was gonna say to Sangina's question, I was gonna add something. What about financial institutions? Because we're talking about exporting those minerals, but what about the money that comes back? If those countries cannot enforce any rules to prevent them from benefiting from that commerce, are there any mechanism that could be applied, let's say, to financial institutions to ask them not to work with any companies which are trading those minerals?
Yeah, so this is not where the big issue comes from, because these companies use a lot of special purpose vehicles to go around these, and there are banks that actually benefit from the money laundering that happens around this. There is a report that was published by the Century, and it shows that banks such as KCB, Kenya Commercial Bank, they are bankers of these of the people who control the mines, or the kleptocratic regimes. And a government or the US may provide sanctions to these people not to use dollars, but there are other economies that are still open to them, like China, and they may still do business by using the Chinese currency or any Far East Asia currency. and they may only get sanctions from the US, but not the EU. So they may deal in other currencies. But if they have sanctions from all the countries, if that's possible, and financial institutions in all the countries also enact policies in place around compliance, money laundering, then it's going to even help further a greater cause.
Yeah, to add on that, I would like to know, in what area do you think efforts have not been made enough to combat these trades?
I think the effort has not been made enough by the Congolese government, because that's where the big issue comes from. So the Congolese government needs to act on its own first to not have any sort of conflict in its region, because when they don't have any conflicts, then they can control what is happening. But the biggest excuse of the Congolese government is that we're trying to fight the conflict, we can't fight it, we cannot fight it, and the smuggling that is also happening, we also cannot control it because we are fighting against like the FDLR or the Mai Mais, and this is not helping us even control like the resources. Like the Congolese government, they only publish reports. Like they will tell you we lose about 15 billions a year just from the illegal trades. But then when we ask them, what are you doing to fight these? They will create some sort of institutions, anti-corruptions, anti-money laundering. But these institutions are the very ones that are perpetrating the corruption and money laundering.
So I think the big issue is even those armies, they need, like, if we could close like the financial support, they would stop doing whatever they're doing. I think maybe that's why the government haven't been able to stop them, because they are also very well financed. I mean,
Yes,
200
yes.
million, like you say, that's a lot of money.
Yes, they're very financed. They have a lot of money to buy guns, do whatever they want. Like some of them live just like millionaires, you know.
All right, we will be taking one more question, final question. Unfortunately for today, Remy wasn't able to connect with us. There's some technical difficulties. We'll look and see if there's any opportunity in the future to get him on so we can have a conversation with him as well in the same line. But we can take one last question for Joel and then call it a wrap for today. Any last takers?
Sure, I'll ask Joel a question. Joel, why did you get involved in basically advocating for this issue?
So the first issue that I advocated was, of course, we're reading history, right? And by being taught history, you're taught about countries like Japan, the Japanese miracle, South Korea, the South Korea miracle, Singapore, the Singapore miracle. And then you're always taught by teachers locally, Congo is the richest country in the world. And then but when you look around, it is a different reality. So you keep asking yourself, what is going on? Why are we not then as rich, or are we not benefiting from our riches as our teachers are telling us, as history, geography is telling us? We even had, and I still have some songs in my head where I can tell you where every mineral is in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But I do not benefit from it, you know? So this was a wake-up call to start researching around what is happening, because it is affecting not only my life, but even the lives of those that I love and my country fellow men. And so I decided to research about conflicts in the Congo. How are they being financed? Who is behind what? Who does that? And the web around it. And I was like, this needs to be denunciated because people are not informed enough.
right. All right. Thank you, Joel, for this conversation and the presentation. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Again, this was an event to just commemorate 60 years since the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. I'd like to thank you all again, and particularly to thank Annette, who was part of organizing this meeting, and then with the support of Joel. Unfortunately, like I said before, Remy, the other panelists, was not able to join us, but we will hope to see that in the future. I also wanted to inform you that this was recorded for the most part, and we will look at the ways to make it available for people who might have missed, or if some of you in your own academic work might want to use some of the references in here, that might be of use. One thing I can ask later or even today is if, Joel, you'd like to share your contact in case someone wants to contact you about further questions, if that's okay with you.
Yes, you can share my email. It's fine.
Yes.
You can reach out to me. Yes.
Yes. So we will be doing that. But otherwise, wherever you are in the world, we hope you stay safe. Take care and be well. And thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thanks, Joel.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Joel. Nice talk.